Welcome to the Office Hours Podcast. This is TK Coleman and Isaac Morehouse. We're like the Geek Squad for your professional development. Got a job you're trying to get, a work-related issue you're trying to resolve, a project you're trying to complete, an obstacle that's holding you up? Well, you're in the right place. You bring the problem, we bring the nuts and bolts. This is where you get philosophical insight and actionable advice on how to take charge of your life and career.
Hey, so a piece of advice about advice, and I'm gonna tell you.
Oh, that's so meta.
So you probably hate that, right? Because it's got the alliteration.
It's all good. I like alliteration.
Advice on advice.
Not when it's forced,
just
like
not.
Every time you use it. Okay, so what's the advice about advice?
Not like when it sounds like you come from the Pentecostal church. Okay, so the advice is don't listen to what people advise. Pay attention to what people admire. It's kind of like the stated versus revealed preference distinction applied to advice. When people give you advice, they're taking into account so many different things, like how much responsibility are you going to assign to them if you fail, their perception of what you're capable of, their predictive abilities concerning what they think you might like, and a whole bunch of other things. But when you watch what people admire, you're getting an unconscious reaction from them that shows you exactly what they think success is. So for instance, most of the things we admire, we never advise other people to do. Everybody loves the J.K. Rowling story, right? The single parent being on welfare, then writing a children's story, something she never did before, making a bunch of money. Everybody loves the Tyler Perry story about, oh, this guy was 40 years old and he was homeless and spent his last little bit of savings on a play. But no one's going to advise you to do that, right? When you come to them and say, hey, what should I do? They'll be like, well, don't even study theater, study communications and business. And they're going to give you like some conservative, boring path. And then when they finish giving you advice and they go talk with their friends and the advice filters off, they're going to talk up the people that do like crazy, like unconventional, rebellious stuff.
I'll break it down to an even smaller, more tangible, maybe more relatable example. Not that your examples were bad, TK. Those were good examples.
I think both of who's the other person I said?
I don't know, J.K. Rowling. And
I try to make it a point to not use two black people. I try to make it a point to not.
You were like, white people. Larry Bird and...
Like I'm still stuck on like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I gotta study more white people so my examples can improve.
I study white people. So here's a concrete example of the. I like that, by the way. Don't listen to people's advice. Watch what or listen to what they admire. You phrased it better than that. More Pentecostal. But just today, I was talking with Lolita, our producer of this podcast. Shout out to Lolita.
Shout out to Lolita,
and
aka Lola.
Speaking of Quora, she has like almost 500,000 views on Quora answers in the last month. She's crazy on there, but she had an answer to a question just the other day, and the question was something about what are the best green flags in an interview, and she basically said, forward tilt. If someone is physically leaning forward, it's a concept we talk about all the time. We have a whole podcast called Forward Tilt. She kind of gives this as like, this is a big green flag. The post blows up.
A green flag is a good thing.
Like, yeah, you want to hire this person, right?
So this is like the opposite of hip-hop, which is lean back.
It's the opposite of a red flag. Yeah, exactly. Back. You want to be like leaning in. I'm not going to get into it. So anyway, she was like, yeah, all these people are saying, well, you're oversimplifying it. Come on, that's not the only thing. Just because someone's physically leaning forward, they might stink in every other way. This is so oversimplified, blah, 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 blah. If you listen to the advice, not a single person would give her advice that's like, hey, Lolita, I advise you to keep giving answers exactly like this one that strip it down to one single trait and ignore all of the caveats. No one would say that. What they will say is, well, you need to account for this. You need to be more nuanced. You need to have caveats. Not everyone works this way, blah, 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 blah. You're oversimplifying. But guess what? Her answer blew up. And if she took all that advice and made an answer that was like, well, there are several other factors, of course, and you got to make sure you do this, and don't oversimplify it. But one thing you could potentially look for is the way that someone's physical stature appears in the interview. But don't put too much stock into it because I can give you 10 examples of how that's not the case, blah, blah. No one would care about it, right? No one would care. So you can see it gets traction even though the advice is, and you made a funny tweet about this. Everyone's advice is, hey, could you be more boring? And make sure you're accommodating more people, and make sure you're doing something that couldn't possibly be misunderstood or offend anyone, everyone will give you that advice. But guess what? What do they admire? They admire people that make bold statements that are easy to misunderstand, that are just one small aspect of reality without apologetically adding all kinds of caveats.
Oh, yeah. And who are they giving their attention to? Like, who are they reading? Who are they commenting on? I'm going to read that tweet because it's very apropos. It's the tweet says, people be like...
Can you quote yourself in a voice of you imitating yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
People... hey, buddy. That's me imitating Isaac's imitation of me. That's how I sound. Hey, buddy, here's how to be successful, buddy. Set yourself up for an inspiring life.
Dress your best for success and the rest.
So I said, people be like, hey, you should change your creative idea to this totally neutral and uncontroversial thing I'm suggesting. That way, no one will feel left out. Then I can have a good time being unprovoked by your undifferentiated value proposition, and I can go back to ignoring you. It's sort of like if I write a post aimed at college opt-outs, and it's a post that's encouraging them or shouting them out, there's always the person that's like, hey, don't you think you should have a qualifying statement letting people who go to college know that they are okay too? And it's like, people want you to write these statements or create work that just factors everybody in. It's marketed towards everybody. There's no way this can possibly exclude anyone.
Every article should have a list. The following people should all feel okay about themselves, despite what I say in this article. You know,
absolutely. But you look at what people watch. Turn the advice filter off. Don't even ask them for a minute. Take a break from that, because that's when the filter turns on. But just pay attention. Pay attention to what they watch on TV. Pay attention to what they read. Pay attention to who they talk about at cocktail parties. Do cocktail parties still happen? But just pay attention to what they talk about, what they praise, and you'll find that their ideas of success are far more rebellious, far more provoking, far more contentious than the safe advice they give. And I think that's something really crucial to take into account, especially if you're part of the mentorship culture where you like to ask people what they think about your life. And what
you just need to listen to more hip hop where they're like, it's like the whole theme. You know, everybody hates on me, but I'm still selling platinum. You know, you can find that in every. Pay attention to those actions.
I want to ask you a question.
Turn me up in the headphone.
Hey, by the way, you know that axe was originally okay to say? That was actually a proper way to say it? Ask?
Well, I mean, it's still used frequently. You mean like spelling wise? It was written that way.
Well, saying it, like ask you a question. I want to ask you a question.
So if you say that, do people correct you?
All the time. All the time. If I so now I have to be like ask a question. But if I say, yo, man, let me ask you a question, people will give me that like condescending smile. It's ask.
Oh, see, I figured that was one of those things that like people would be disappointed if like a white person met you and you said ask. They'd be like, oh, I wanted the authentic black experience. Like I wanted you to say ask. You know what I mean?
Hey, it was funny. So I have a friend who auditioned for this. No, it wasn't an audition. He actually booked it. He had it was like a Taco Bell commercial, right? And he's a black dude. And it's him and a white guy doing the commercial. And so the line was something like, check out this new special, right? And so my friend's like, check out this new special. And the guy stopped it, the director. He's like, can you enunciate a little bit more? And my friend was like, yeah, sure. He was like, check out this new special, right? And the guy was like, can you give us a little bit more with that? And it got to the point, like on take 5, the white guy was like, dude, this is like more articulate than anybody in the real world talks. What does he want from you? It was like he had his brother filter on, and all he could hear was, I want to ask you a question about this special, man.
So there's a YouTube commenter on office hours, and he said, you guys need to lose the ghetto talk because you're going to be more successful that way.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, he commented on
Lose the ghetto talk?
Yes.
So my
I
favorite.
like how I'm just so flattered that he said you guys. He's lumping
That's
me
the
in.
best part.
I'm from the streets, you know?
That's the best part. That
Hey,
he said you
YouTube
got.
commenter, I can't help it, all right? The streets are a part of me, okay?
That's gonna elevate your career. He's like, you guys. I'm so insulted that he didn't just like aim that at me. I'm so mad. Like, how you gonna put us on the same level?
We're going to do a movie documenting us taking that comment seriously. It's going to be like that movie My Fair Lady, where you got to teach proper diction. We're going to go get like a coach to teach us to be less, what, street or ghetto?
We should do
whatever.
like a test too, where we just turn the cameras off and then have you answer something, and then me go afterwards and be like, who talks more ghetto? And see who wins. Everything would be on the line. Hey, but I appreciate that too, because that means your impersonation of me is off. If I need to drop the ghetto talk, then that means I don't sound like the way you imitate me.
I'll just leave that one. We'll leave it. We'll leave it. Let's move on.
All right, so check it out. So I wrote this tweet on college, and here's what I said, and I want to talk about your reply to it.
Why are you so obsessed with college, TK?
I said, I love college. I love it like a parent loves a little baby. I want to see it grow up and stand on its own 2 feet. I don't want colleges to die. I want colleges to learn how to thrive without government life support. That's how real innovation in higher education happens. You replied, kill the life-leeching accreditation, grants, subsidies, federal loans, and regulations. Then the colleges with something to offer have a chance to blossom into something awesome or be replaced by something that can. You know, I really like that you wrote that, because I think a lot of people are quick to say when we criticize certain things like, oh, that's anti-college. And we did a whole segment on that, like, are you anti-college? But I haven't met anyone who is against the idea of people voluntarily spending their money to go into an environment where they talk about ideas, where they read books and they discuss things and, you know, interact with other people. And I love to hear you talk more about what you think higher education can become if we didn't have this highly subsidized system that we have now. Like what would the great, awesome version of college look like?
That's a great question. That's a really hard question in any area of the market that's completely warped and distorted by, government intervention, to imagine what it could be like absent that. And it's, in some ways it's a futile exercise because you can never envision what the market would do, but it's also a fruitful exercise and a very fun, sort of hopeful exercise. So if you kind of break it down, there is a tremendous demand for a lot of the elements in the bundle that college is trying to sort of sell you. And it's this giant bundle that includes all these different things. So I see, and this is happening even now, even with the incredibly unlevel playing field and all the subsidies and all these incentives and stuff like that make this college able to survive where it wouldn't in the market. But I could see a lot of interesting things. Like, for example, the whole, hey, I want to live in a dormitory-like, campus-like environment with other people roughly my same age or station in life for a while. I could see something like apartment complexes becoming more of a dorm-like or a campus-like environment. Like, hey, we have this campus, and
almost like a WeWork version for
exactly.
learning.
Like, hey, you want your kid is going to be taking some courses on Udemy, doing some apprenticeships, doing some whatever, and if you want to help them pay for this, you can do a 2-year lease in this, campus space where we kind of provide the living and social element of college. Like, I can see that.
We're seeing a lot of
off.
tech companies take that campus approach anyway, right?
Absolutely,
Like,
yeah. And I see that the WeWorks of the world, like, I can see a lot more of that for those people who are in a process of discovery where they're not ready to go work full time somewhere necessarily. They don't want to just backpack Europe or whatever, but they want to be out from their parents' house, kind of doing something and have some kind of a social experience. I mean, you could do that for so much less money. You could have so much flexibility. So I see a lot of that. In terms of the classroom experience itself, the real shame, and I've written about this for Fee, the credential is killing the classroom is the name of the article, but the real shame is, like, the idea of physically in person sitting around with a handful of people and somebody who is very well versed in a topic, could be epistemology, could be the history of France, could be anything, and having a lecture and or discussion based, Socratic, whatever, dialogue, like that can be an amazing experience if a few conditions are met. And the main condition is if everybody there really wants to be there for the content itself. If that's why they're there. If they're there paying a cost to get some piece of paper that's accredited that they think will get them a job, then the quality is going to be what the typical classroom is, which is terrible.
That word accredited is key, though, because I think it's totally cool if people have a more superficial reason for being in that environment.
It is, but the quality will be worse.
Okay, so
I mean, plain and simple. You've been to seminars, summer seminars,
right?
When the seminars are the only attendees are people who are truly there because they're interested in the subject matter. 10 times better than the ones where half of the attendees are getting extra credit for school. Every time. The quality is just better. And so much so that I don't even like to do the latter kind. I don't want to go to any kind of event where the audience members are there for a reason other than being interested in my talk. I'm like it's too depressing for me. My ego is too fragile.
You ever had anybody show up to one of your talks and just like fall asleep or look visibly bored?
Yeah, when I used to speak at Charleston Southern University, I used to go and teach class every semester. And it was unbelievable. It was like, I'm a hilarious guy. None of my jokes were landing. I put together these slides. I tried everything. And it was a classroom of only like 20 or 30, so you would think the fear of obviously looking down at your phone would stop people. It was unbelievable. It was like I was in a prison and these people were sentenced to listen to me at this class. It was like they were suffering to be there. They were so tuned out. And they were paying tons of money for this. It was crazy. So what you would get in quality, and we're seeing this. I interviewed Thaddeus Russell on the Career Crashers podcast, who's left academia to be an intellectual outside of academia. And he runs these weekend seminars. He runs these where people are just voluntarily there to learn about history. And he's like, it's unbelievable. The quality, the discussion, it's invigorating. It's what you would want an intellectual experience to be, staying up till 2 a.m, talking about philosophy. Yeah. So there's so much room for that. And I could see that kind of thing blossoming, having places physical, virtual, where the people who are amazing teachers and discussion leaders and researchers engaging with people on these ideas, there's so much of a market for that.
All right, so 2 things. First, you sounded like Bill Walton when you did that rant. You were like, it's unbelievable.
I spent time with Thaddeus Russell, who's one of the greatest historians.
Philosophy. Unbelievable. So there's an article on fee.org called As College Subsidies Rise, Student Learning Declines. And here's an excerpt from that I thought was dead on and consistent with what you were just saying here. The federal government provides more student loans and spends more money on higher education than it used to, but colleges just raise tuition to match the increased spending. That's the conclusion to be drawn from a 2015 report by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. On average, the report finds, each additional dollar in government financial aid translated to a tuition hike of about 65 cents. That indicates that the biggest direct beneficiaries of federal aid are schools rather than the students hoping to attend them. By subsidizing college, federal financial aid diverts young people away from vocational training that costs taxpayers far less but can lead to jobs with better pay and more value for America's economy. I think that's something that doesn't really get talked about enough, how subsidies artificially protect people from the pain point of buying the college experience. And when you remove that artificial protection and people have to bear the cost of the decisions they make, you don't involve the government to make it really easy for them to pay, right? So if something costs 70 grand and you don't have the government saying, hey, we'll make it easy for you to experience the product for about 5 years before you have to start paying, people begin to think more critically about the decisions. And it's not so much that it makes it harder for people to pay, it actually makes it harder for colleges to get away with the inefficiencies that they now currently have the luxuries of ignoring. When people aren't paying for something, when it's harder for people to pay for something, then that means it's harder for service providers to make money from those people. And they either have to bring those prices down or they have to raise up the quality so that people are motivated to pay. That gets left out of the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if you care about the ostensible goals of universities, you would be begging for government to get out of the way. It destroys it. It brings the quality down. It severs the link of accountability between the consumer and the producer. I mean, that was what gave me the original epiphany, which took a decade before it led to the creation of Praxis. But as a college student, I was like, this is the weirdest relationship ever. I'm paying all this money, and the producers of this good don't care at all about what I think. They don't care. It's just like healthcare. They don't care because they're not getting the money directly from you. And they're like, a given professor, they don't care if you hate their class. It's completely, they're held completely harmless from that. So it's the crappiest experience all around. And there's, it's like a wonder that there are pockets of good experience that happen to occur given how bad the incentives are. But that just shows you that there is a lot of market value hidden inside a lot of crap. And the really good teachers, the good researchers, the people who are awesome at what they do, they would actually thrive if they weren't under the yoke of all this subsidized crap that lumps them in with everything else and forces them to serve consumers that don't even want to be there,
Yeah, that's kind of funny too, because when you talk about this topic, there are always people who say, hey, not all colleges have those inefficiencies. There are some really good colleges doing interesting things. And if you believe that, or if you know that, then that's all the more reason to subject the colleges that are doing things inefficiently to the marketplace conditions that cause those ones that are doing it right to thrive.
Can you imagine what would happen in Praxis if it was like, hey guys, the government is now going to fund anybody that wants to go to Praxis. They won't have to pay up front. They won't feel that cost. You guys are going to get some legal monopoly privileges. We're going to tell you how to do a few things, but you're going to get this flood of students who have no skin in the game, or at least don't think they do up front. And you got to bring them in. I mean, that would destroy the quality of the experience. Part of what makes a business great, it's not just, it's their ability to choose who their customer is, right? If you are a psychiatrist and you're forced to have as customers people who pay you nothing and who hate psychiatry and think it's stupid, how awful would that be for everybody, right?
Right.
So there's something that's just, you want to destroy something, put it under the support of government, and you'll immediately destroy the quality.
There's another element too here with how we think about prices and what the function of a price is. When we talk about things like, hey, free college.
Prices, the function of a prices. Priceless prices and the function of prices.
That's that ghetto talk, the function of a price.
Hey, would you stop being so street? You're alienating our listener.
Yo, man, I'm talking about the epistemology of the...
You got nowhere to go with that one. Ontology, cosmology?
Talking about the ontological ramifications of the epistemic underpinnings of what I'm saying right now, son. No,
maniacal, biological, epistemological.
I think we lost that guy.
We lost everybody.
We lost that guy.
We lost me on that part. I'm actually kind of irritated.
All right, so when we look at prices, we kind of think of those prices as being objective. Like the cost of college is this objective thing. It is what it is. And what we want to do as a society is we want to make it possible for more people to go. So let's have somebody else pay for that. But if you remove that kind of system, now that cost of college becomes far more negotiable. I mean, the rule of innovation is that as businesses are free to innovate because they're subject to the accountability that comes with the market, the cost of production becomes cheaper. I think about things like, think about like the first computer, how inefficient it was, how expensive it was compared to what you can get with a smartphone today. Imagine if at that period, like when we had the first computer, if it was the goal of the government to say, hey, let's make this computer, let's get everyone at that cost a computer so everyone can succeed, then we wouldn't have had the conditions that got us to the point where now for a fraction of that cost, you can get a machine that's like 5 times better than that first computer and much smaller and more convenient.
I was talking about this with my coworker Mitchell, because he's dealing with the DMV lately. Been several days trying to sort everything out, whatever. And I was just saying how absurd it is. I've been in there before where it's like, all I'm trying to do is abide by your stupid laws and pay you money. and you won't let me do it. You're making it so hard. You don't accept credit cards. You need 15 forms of ID. You need me to do this. Can you imagine if Netflix were like, if I'm like, hey, Netflix, I want to pay you money to use your service. If they were run like the DMV, it would take me like a month to figure out how to start paying them.
Oh, they lose your business really quickly, right? You go to Amazon, you go to Hulu, you go somewhere else.
Oh my gosh.
You can't go anywhere else with the DMV.
Okay, so this is something interesting. You've mentioned this before. A lot of people who are generally in favor of like limited government, conservatives, and what conservatives say they're in favor of limited government, it's sort of questionable or selective, but libertarians certainly, self-described libertarians tend to be like, hey, I'm in favor of limited government and shrink the government. You've mentioned this to me before. You're like, why is college basically never mentioned? You hear people talk and write articles and stuff about like, hey, eliminate the welfare state, K through 12 education, whatever.
Yeah.
Why do you not hear almost ever libertarians being like government out of colleges? What's your take on that?
I'm so confused by it. In fact, I could be wrong by this, but I believe that if I were to go on Facebook right now and write some critique of the subsidized system, that I probably get more criticism from people in that group than any kind of endorsement. I truly don't understand it, especially because when it comes to the welfare state, big government, socialism, that crowd is super on top of criticizing anything that someone says from that perspective. And they don't seem to be afraid of losing friends and fans of it, over it, or being thought of as like, non-empathetic people. So take, for instance, the stance against minimum wage. From a superficial perspective, that's going to just make you look like you don't care about the poor. Even if you have a good argument for it, even if the economics bear out on your side, it's going to make you look to most people like you don't care about the poor. But they're not afraid of that. So I don't get why college just kind of gets passed over. It's a fight to maybe take control of college so that those darn liberal professors aren't indoctrinating our children, but there's no mass call for like, hey, migrating out of college to just do private universities or do apprenticeships and trade schools and so forth. That system seems to be, for the most part, uncritiqued in this way. I don't get it.
I understand it with conservatives because I think conservatives, it's not so much a fundamental principled commitment to limited government in general, right? Conservatives like a very unlimited military oftentimes or other things. It's more, they don't like universities because of the particular ideologies that they dislike that are often popular there. And so I feel like and conservatives tend to like authority in general, and the university system, the intellectual sphere, established institutional intellectuals is sort of part of the authority structure. They just want it to have different ideas.
Sure, that makes sense.
And so it's more like, hey, if we had better ideas in universities, sure, they deserve funding and research or whatever. Libertarians are truly baffling though, because I've been around, libertarian world for a long time, and the absence of outright criticism for government involvement in higher education is kind of funny. Now, I think what you normally hear is like, well, at least it's a partial market. At least government only does some grants and subsidies. It's not like K through 12 public schools where they fund the whole thing. It's not nearly as bad as that. Well, it's not as bad as some other parts of the world. Their universities are more government run. It's a quasi market. You do have private universities, even though they get government subsidies and all this other stuff. So it's kind of like, well, it's more market oriented. So there are bigger problems in the world. There's that one. But I think there's a big element of it that it's kind of like, well, let's wait on that topic and make other issues bigger because it gets a little close to home. Let's be honest. The vast majority of libertarian intellectuals are academics, or many of them were academics. I mean, Milton Friedman was at the University of Chicago, like F.A. Hayek was at a university, London School of Economics. And so there's this sort of tradition of, hey, people that I respect who have great ideas, ideas I've been influenced by, people who have big voices today. Well, they're part of academia. So like I respect academia, and yeah, I don't really like the government stuff, but like it's hard to draw the line and tell what's the result of subsidy and whatnot. And let's just not talk about that because it's a little uncomfortable. And there's just a fear, frankly, among academics of like breaking free from that system. Like, why aren't there more Thaddeus Russells? Why aren't there more? Like, go start, like Dan Carlin's podcast is like running circles around every history professor out there. Like, why don't more people, frankly, have the balls to do that? Especially libertarians, the ones who talk the talk about innovation, entrepreneurship, market alternatives, and they're sitting in these subsidized, tenured, government-created, cartelized, school factories. And to their credit, like Brian Kaplan's awesome. He heavily criticizes that stuff. Others do. And some of them will say like, well, my chair is a privately endowed chair and whatever. So, and I'm not trying to say like, you're all hypocrites, but I do think it's interesting that you almost never hear, it's very rare. Kaplan's one of the big exceptions, like an all out, the university system is a total cluster and it's all messed up with government involvement and government should get out of it altogether. It's a weird thing. It's missing from a lot of libertarian discussion.
I suppose it can be really easy if you feel like it's not going to change, to just focus on doing what you can do within the context, where you're doing it. So if I'm a libertarian professor and I know I'm not going to change the system, hey, maybe I can just teach philosophy or teach history and influence a few minds since this is going to exist anyway. And I can empathize with that because I'm pessimistic on the system. I don't know if you are, but I don't think that's going to change. I think it's going to be subsidized.
I'm hugely optimistic.
You're optimistic
Absolutely.
on that? Absolutely. Based on what?
Dude, it's going to go the way of the Queen of England.
So
she's still around, but she's symbolic only. Her power is almost meaningless. It's going the way of the post office. Still around, but every day, every year, it means it's less important than ever because we've innovated around it. Who cares? We mostly, like, when was the last time the mail carried something really important? Unless it was Amazon forcing the post office to act a little bit more like a business, right?
Yeah.
FedEx and UPS and whatever handle parcels, and you got email and you got whatever. So, like, yeah, that stranglehold because of the postal union and all this garbage hasn't gone away. But the fact that it hasn't gone away is less important than it's ever been in history because the delivery of first-class mail has been innovated around to where, the taxi cartels still haven't gone away in most cities. But guess what? They're less important than they've ever been.
Hey, so let's talk about this
They're
aspect.
undermined by innovation, man.
I got you. Let's talk about this aspect of you made it a point to say, hey, I'm not saying you guys are hypocrites because you work in that system.
Yeah, maybe not, because there's always a line like, if you're like totally anti-government, well then, you're paying taxes. How about you just stop paying taxes and like really show your beliefs and go to jail for them, or stop driving on roads that are funded through taxes or whatever. Like, yeah. I'm not going to try to say where that line should be drawn, but I think there is a pretty interesting absence of discussion around the university.